Hi, I'm Amy Vanderpool from the Anana Project, and also known as Girls Really Rule on Twitter, and you're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. You're really going to like this episode. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I'm here with Cam Davis, who is a commissioner with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. Did I get all of that right?
Yeah. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really fun to talk to you guys.
Yeah, so longtime listeners may remember that Cam was on last summer. We talked to you about your kind of wacky primary write-in contest. And then in November, you were elected to the, what is the acronym here? The MWRDGC?
Yep. Sometimes we just call it the district to keep it simple.
So congratulations on your election and on the legal issues were all worked out and you were able to actually become the commissioner.
Well, thanks. Congrats to all of us. This is, to me, it was a real testament to the fact that when people really put their minds to it, they can win. And I felt like we won because it was a write-in. And it's one of those things where you don't really pay attention unless you actually really care about the fate of the world, or at least our little corner of it. So I feel like it was a win for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. So we've been doing these episodes on climate change and things related to climate change. And I suspect most people, when they think about climate change, don't think about their Metropolitan Water Reclamation District or whatever the equivalent is in their town. But that's probably because most people don't realize that such a thing exists. So maybe we could start with just a little bit about what the district does. What's sort of the purpose? This is at least in the Greater Chicago region, is a rather large district. There are 9 people on the commission. So can you talk a little bit about sort of what the role of this branch of government is?
Sure. So the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District helps to clean our water once we use it. That's the very short answer. Where does it do this? It does this largely throughout Cook County. It's an agency that has about 2,000 staff people and a budget about $1.1 billion that's mostly funded through our property taxes. So that's the thumbnail of the Water Reclamation District. It's really important because public health is tied very closely to how we use our waters.
So what is your background for people who may not remember the earlier episode? What is your background? How do you get into something like being a commissioner on this board?
My background is, I'll give you the very personal answer, which is actually tied to some spiritual elements of water. A long time ago, as a kid, I, with my family, my brother, sister, and I, and parents, we would go to the beach at Lake Michigan, and I would just marvel at how Lake Michigan seemed to go on forever. To me, it seemed infinite. And as I got older, I realized that we all are connected through water. We all need it to thrive. We all need it to survive. And I became interested in how we take care of it as a way of taking care of ourselves. And so as I got older and went through college, I decided that I wanted to do more to help protect our water, because I felt like if I protect water, I'd be protecting all of us. And wound up working for an organization called the Alliance for the Great Lakes, a nonprofit headquartered here in Chicago that organizes volunteers to help the Great Lakes, and wanted to put myself through law school at night to help understand how law worked and how I could use the law to protect water. So that's my training. That's what I have done in my life. I grew up as a Clean Water Act attorney. I wound up over time getting to know a state senator here in Illinois whose beaches were closing because of pathogenic pollution, and wanted to know why they were closing and what people could do to help keep their beaches from closing. And he wound up moving on to be elected to a U.S. senator, and then wound up being elected to president, and decided to help him out to protect the Great Lakes over time. So when this position opened up after my 8 years with the Obama administration, I decided I was going to take my first venture into the elected world so that I could help water. That's the background. That's really why I decided to do it. It's not complicated. It really has to do with the very real belief that we're all connected through water, and that it's not a game. We have to protect water if we want to protect our economy, if we want to protect our communities, and we want to protect our public health.
And so what are some of the ways that the district works to protect, to help make sure the water is clean and drinkable and help protect public health?
The Metropolitan Water Reclamation District operates 7 what we call water reclamation plants. These are big facilities to smaller facilities around Cook County that take the water that we use in our homes and our businesses, and then treats that water so that when it goes back into the world, it's clean and it's meeting water quality standards that are set by the state of Illinois for public health.
Are there changes that have been happening to our water systems? Is this sort of long-standing stuff that, we've been working on for a really long time? Are there things that have been changing in recent years in that regard, or is it just the technology to do the cleanup and the sanitation that changes?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I'm a real believer that water reclamation plants first begin with our homes. How we use water in our homes is the first line of defense when it comes to clean water. If we use a lot of fertilizer on our lawns, or if we dispose of medicine down our toilets and our drains, that is all stuff that winds up going somewhere. And what we don't want, and I'm convinced none of us want this, we need to make sure that we're stewarding our water starting with our homes. And it's a nice parallel that HOMES, HOMES, is an acronym for the Great Lakes: Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior, HOMES. Water is our homes. We live around water. We use water. Water is some 55 to 70% of our bodies. We're one and the same. What we do to our waterways, we do to ourselves, and how we treat our water is a reflection of how we treat ourselves. So starting first in how we use water in our homes is really important. And then once it leaves our homes, once it leaves our use, making sure that the Water Reclamation District is doing its job to help protect our waterways even further is really important. So first thing, be cognizant of how we use water around our homes. Second is to be aware of what the district does on our behalf as Cook County taxpayers, and making sure we're doing a good job on behalf of the people of Cook County.
What are some of the challenges that climate change and the effects of climate change are going to bring about for sanitizing and cleaning up water?
When we talk about climate change, let's be really clear about what we're talking about here, because I think the term can scare a lot of people, mm-hmm. and fear can paralyze our ability to do something about it. Climate change really has to do with how we use energy and what kind of energy we use, what kind of electricity we generate. It's largely created through fossil fuels. When we use fossil fuels, it can change the composition of the atmosphere, which results in changes to the climate. that in and of itself is something that, a lot of people follow and are interested in, but let's talk about the effects of that real quick. When the climate changes, it can have a variety of effects on us personally. For purposes of the district and what it does, when the climate changes as it is right now, we see more intense rainstorms. We may see more rainstorms. We may see more drought. So more intense weather is really important for us to think about. Storms can really overwhelm our sewer systems. Storms can ultimately, if they get too intense in too short a period of time, back up into our basements. They can result in what we call river reversals, which is when there's too much water for our water reclamation plants to handle. The water has to go somewhere, and it can result in the river, the Chicago River system, reversing into Lake Michigan, which is our drinking water supply. So that way, wastewater winds up going out into the lake, affecting beaches, affecting swimming, and putting our drinking water supply at some kind of risk. I want to qualify what that thing means, and that is that doesn't mean that our drinking water necessarily is unsafe to drink, but it does mean that in some instances, there have to be precautions taken to help ensure that water is clean and safe for drinking, which can mean more chlorine added, things like that. Either way, we don't want to see river reversals. We don't want to see wastewater backing up into our basements. We don't want to see flooding that impacts our homes. Those are all the kinds of things that impact us personally and impact our wallets and pocketbooks as a result of climate change.
I remember reading in your campaign materials, you would talk about green infrastructure and wanting our region to be a leader in green infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and what that would mean in terms of sort of effects on the region?
Sure. Well, let's first talk about traditional infrastructure. Traditional infrastructure are the 3 Ps: plants, pipes, and pumps. This is the hard traditional infrastructure that we rely on to carry water to us and carry water away from us. Most of us don't think about this day to day, but it has a tremendous impact in supporting our day-to-day lives. So when you use water, it goes down the drain, through a pipe, out into a main, and then to a treatment plant where it's cleaned and then sent back out into the world. That all is a function of traditional infrastructure. Green infrastructure, also called sustainable infrastructure, is conveying water in a way that uses nature. So instead of necessarily sending water back out into the gutter by the curb and down into a sewer, green infrastructure tries to use nature to act as a sponge to absorb it, to clean it naturally, and then send it back into the world in better shape than once it hit the ground. It's a technique, it's an approach to water quality management and flood management that has a whole lot of benefits. It can be a little less expensive to maintain. It takes advantage of open space. It requires jobs to build and to maintain over time. There are a whole lot of other benefits to green infrastructure. It can also provide habitat for animals and birds that traditional infrastructure just can't provide. And at a time when we're losing habitat for the animals that live around us, having green infrastructure to help support life is really important.
So I guess it occurs to me that I don't actually know where the budget for this district comes from. Is this something that's a state budget, a county budget, a city budget?
The district's budget is actually a separate budget from the state and from Cook County. The Water Reclamation District is its own taxing district. sometimes it's called a special district. But when you take a look at your property tax bill, which for all of us should be coming usually in March for the previous spring, you will see on it a separate line item. I'm actually pulling mine out right now as we speak. I keep it close to me. That's a sign of geekiness if I don't know what is. But if you take a look at your tax bill, you see a whole lot of varieties of taxes that appear on it. There are Cook County taxes, there are municipal taxes, school taxes, and at least in my tax bill that comes, there's a category called miscellaneous taxes, and under that there's the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. The district is funded through our property taxes.
So does that mean then that the district has some autonomy when it comes to making decisions about the kinds of, the way it's going to use its budget, or are there things that are somewhat constrained in working with the state government, the city government?
Yeah, the district has a lot of autonomy. It has to follow the standards that are set by the state and that are overseen by the federal government, the U.S. EPA, an agency that I used to work for in the Obama administration. But by and large, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District has an independent staff, has its own budget to do what it needs to do in order to ensure clean water for the greater Chicago area.
So part of why I'm asking that and sort of thinking more largely about audience that may not be in this region as well is to think about the ways that local or regional organizations can be working independent of what a state or the federal government might set. So ways that a local metropolitan or county or regional organization may be able to think about greening infrastructure, making that a priority without having to, get the permission of a state government. I mean, we're in Illinois where we now, of course, have a Democratic governor and a Democratic state house, but that may not be the case everywhere. And so, is this a place where people can sort of start to think about ways that we can be moving toward a greener system, regardless of whatever frustrations we might have with the federal government not setting high enough standards?
I'm so glad you asked that question, and it's a timely question because we right now, at least as of the time we're talking, there's a partial federal government shutdown. And so I think especially during this time, what we see is that local government, municipal government, like the Water Reclamation District, is something that people appreciate more and more. When the federal government isn't working, when state government is not working, municipal government is what really impacts our day-to-day lives. It's really what supports us being able to get to work. It's what supports us with our schools, with our libraries, fire departments, police departments, and public health. So, yeah, the Water Reclamation District here in Chicago, in the Chicago metro region, is what we here rely upon for clean water, but there are municipal water agencies all around the country that work very hard to ensure clean water for our health. So if your listeners are listening from other parts of the country, chances are they have an agency a lot like the Water Reclamation District here in Chicago that does what our district does, or something very similar. The one thing that I have come to realize is very unique about our Water Reclamation District is that its 9 commissioners on the Board of Commissioners are elected. And a lot of municipal water agencies around the country and the public that is served by them aren't so lucky. They often are appointees rather than elected officials. So here in the greater Chicago area, we actually have the benefit of electing people directly to serve them. And I'm fortunate to be one of 9 commissioners who oversee an agency like the district so that it can do the very best work possible for the public.
What are some things that you would recommend people do on an individual basis to make sure that we are conserving water, to make sure that we are not putting things into our waterways that we shouldn't be?
Sure. Well, one of the best things to do is conserve water. The less water we use, it has a whole bunch of benefits. Number one, you conserve energy and you reduce your energy bill. You also reduce your water bill, and you reduce the potential for putting things into water that then have to be treated down the line as well. So water conservation is one of these rare things that we can do that has a whole bunch of benefits to it. So that's the first recommendation. And the second recommendation is just be mindful. You don't have to do, a full audit or anything like that, but be mindful of how water is used around your home or your business. So, for example, one thing that you can do to reduce water that runs off into our sewer system is help support tree planting efforts. One medium-sized oak tree can absorb 2,800 gallons of water per year. That's water that otherwise doesn't go into the storm system. And it's a great example of one of the elements of green infrastructure that we talked a little bit about earlier. So that's one thing people can do. One thing that we do around our home is have what are called rain barrels, and those are containers that help take water that runs off of the roof of our home. That water then goes into a rain barrel, and then we reuse that water for watering our garden, our vegetable garden. I have 2 young kids, and I love teaching them about how to grow food, your own food, why it's important to do that, where your food comes from. We use the water that runs off of the roof of our home that goes into rain barrels to help water our vegetable gardens. So that's another example of the kind of thing that people can do in their day-to-day lives. Water conservation, get a rain barrel and harvest the water that runs off of your roof, put it to good use. It keeps it out of the sewer system, which reduces wear and tear into the agency's water use efforts.
You mentioned that you have kids. I do as well. Are there any particular books or shows or anything that you would recommend to teach them about water?
I'll tell a quick story. One of the things that I do is just start with my own stories. And that is, I teach my kids every day about how important it is to save water because it's good for plants and animals. It's good for us, things like that. So, when I'm brushing my teeth with my daughter at night or in the morning or something like that, and honestly, literally, if I leave the water on 1 second too long, my daughter will tell me about it. I hear about it. So I'm really proud that I'm starting to raise water advocates in my household. There's a book that comes to mind called The Day the Great Lakes Drained Away. That it's not terribly realistic, but it's a snapshot. It's almost an imaginary snapshot of what it would be like if we didn't have the Great Lakes. And fortunately, we will have them and have them for a long time. But it does make kids appreciate what we have and that we really can't take those things for granted.
I remember being at a meeting that Deb Shore was at. She's another one of the commissioners, and she was talking.
I'm a big fan of her.
Yes, and she was talking about biosolids and things that the district was doing with phosphorus. And I'll admit the science of a lot of it goes over my head. But could you talk a little bit about sort of that aspect of cleaning the water and then what happens with the other things, the things you remove from the water?
Sure. Well, phosphorus is an element that is one of the building blocks to life. We excrete it when we go to the bathroom. It is used as a fertilizer. We also put solar panels on our home last spring, and phosphorus is used in the production of solar panels, which I hadn't known until I got solar panels installed. But it is mined in very few locations around the world, and those supplies of phosphorus are not expected to last forever. So one of the things that's happening right now that I'm really excited about with the Water Reclamation District is that phosphorus is recovered from the wastewater stream. When it's excreted, it's sent into our water reclamation plants that I talked about before, and there it's taken out of the waste stream, converted into pellets, and then can be used as fertilizer. So what we're seeing more and more is if you really want to be nerdy about this stuff like I am, you don't really talk about wastewater treatment plants like we used to do. You call them water reclamation plants because the goal is to reclaim, to recover the resources in water once it's been used. And phosphorus is a great example of how something is taken out of the water stream once it's been used and reshaped into something that's reusable. And more, that's what we're going to see. That's what we should be seeing out of our water utilities like the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District.
Is there anything else that you want to make sure we talk about?
I just really want to thank you, Kelly, for taking the time to do this. One of the things that I learned in my race is that people were fascinated to learn about what the Water Reclamation District does and how it helps all of us in our day-to-day lives. A lot of people didn't know it before this race. And so I felt like, the race wasn't about getting me elected. It was really about educating people about the importance of water in our daily lives, especially here in Chicago, the Chicago area, which is a metro region that really owes itself, its establishment to its location next to water and its connection to water.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm totally fascinated by all of this. And my kids were super excited to hear I was talking to someone from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District because my kids are super nerdy as well.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Kelly. And, we are always open to giving people tours of what the Water Reclamation District does. So I hope folks will feel that they can always call our office and request a tour, and we would love to help make sure that they get set up for that.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Sure. No problem. If people want to reach us, the phone number is 312-751-3579, and we are really eager to help.
Great. I'll put that up on our website, too, so people can find it if they didn't get a chance to write it down.
Sounds good. Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant-Shaped Trees by the band MWRD, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Wethlin and was created for use by this podcast.